There is a particular kind of silence that arrives the day after you hit the number. It doesn't announce itself. There's no ceremony, no one waiting outside with a sign. Just a Tuesday morning that used to have a shape. Alarm, commute, inbox, the low hum of somewhere to be, and now doesn't. For years, the number was the story. It was the reason the coffee was made at home instead of bought, the reason the vacation got shorter, the reason the promotion mattered less than the savings rate. And then one afternoon, a spreadsheet cell turns green and the story is technically over. What replaces it is rarely discussed in the communities that spent years helping a person get there. FIRE, financial independence, retire early, is usually sold as a destination. Reach the number, and the rest of life opens up like a held breath finally released. The math behind it is not mysterious. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. Let time and compounding do slow, patient work. None of that is in dispute here. What deserves more honesty is what the pursuit actually asks of a person while they're inside it, and what it leaves them holding once the pursuit is finished. Start with the years themselves, because they are the part almost never counted. A high savings rate is not simply a percentage on a chart. It is 1,000 small refusals, repeated for a decade or more. It's the wedding declined because of the flight cost, the dinner where everyone orders, and one person quietly does the math before the check arrives, the apartment kept a size too small because moving up would move the number further away. Any single refusal is nothing. A decade of them accumulates into something closer to a personality, a reflex of restraint that doesn't necessarily switch off just because the account balance says it's allowed to. Picture the version of this that's easy to imagine, because it happens constantly. Someone hits their number at 41, leaves a job they'd quietly hated for 6 of the 10 years it took to get there, and spends the first month doing exactly what the plan promised. Sleeping without an alarm, reading in the afternoon, taking the kind of walk that has no destination. By the second month, a strange thing happens. They start a spreadsheet, not for the money this time, for the days. Hours read, hours walked, a small tracked column for productive, as if idleness itself needed to be optimized to count as earned. The instinct that built the number in the first place doesn't have anywhere else to go, so it turns and points at the free time instead. This isn't a flaw unique to one person. It's what a decade of practiced restraint trains a mind to do by default, and it rarely gets mentioned in the retirement date countdown posts, because it doesn't show up until the countdown reaches 0. This is the part that rarely makes it into the success story. Austerity, practiced long enough, stops being a strategy and starts being an identity. People who spend years optimizing every dollar often find that the optimizing doesn't stop when the goal is reached. The muscle that says not yet, not this, doesn't have an off switch installed by an algorithm. It has to be unlearned, slowly, and unlearning turns out to be harder than the original discipline was to build. Then there's what happens to the people around the person chasing the number. Frugality is a private discipline that has public consequences. A friend group settles into a rhythm of dinners and trips and small indulgences, and the person optimizing for a future date either explains again why they're not coming, or comes and spends the whole time doing arithmetic instead of being present. Partners absorb a version of this that's easy to underestimate. The shared years of a relationship spent in a kind of low-grade deferral, where today is treated as a rehearsal for a better today that hasn't arrived yet. That deferral doesn't look like damage while it's happening. It looks like discipline, right up until one partner realizes the good years were the ones being saved for later, and later already came and went. For those who actually get there, who hit the number and step away from the income that built it, there's the thing psychologists call the arrival fallacy, the belief that reaching a goal will produce a lasting change in how a person feels, when the feeling is almost always far more temporary than expected. The number solves the problem it was built to solve. It does not solve the separate older problem of what a person's days are for. Work, whatever its faults, tends to supply structure and a rough answer to what do I do today without anyone having to ask for it. Remove it suddenly, after a decade of defining yourself by the absence of spending, and the structure has to be rebuilt from nothing, often at exactly the moment old friends are still commuting, still climbing, still unavailable during the hours that used to be the workday. The people who seem to land this transition well tend to share one thing. They didn't wait for the number to arrive before starting the second half of the work. They treated the identity shift as its own project, years in advance, the same way they treated the savings rate, trying out a shorter work week before quitting entirely, building a hobby into something closer to a second structure, staying loosely connected to a community that had nothing to do with income. None of that shows up on a net worth chart. It doesn't compound, and there's no dashboard for it. But it's the difference between a landing and a fall, and almost nobody budgets time for it, because the spreadsheet never asks. None of this cancels out the other side. People do reach financial independence and mean it when they call it the best decision of their life. More time with children while they're young, room to leave a job that was costing them their health, space to build something slower than a career path would have allowed. Those stories are real, but they don't erase the quieter ones. And pretending the number resolves everything is exactly the kind of promise that makes the after harder to talk about when it doesn't. What seems worth saying plainly is that the number is not the whole project. The spreadsheet can tell a person exactly how many years stand between them and financial independence. It cannot tell them who they'll be when they get there, or what the version of themselves built by a decade of restraint will actually want to do with a free Tuesday. That second question doesn't compound the way money does, and it doesn't wait patiently for the first one to finish before it needs an answer. The more honest version of the pursuit isn't sacrifice everything now, live later. It's slower and less marketable than that. Build the number and build at the same time and on purpose. The person who can actually receive it, someone who has practiced rest before it became mandatory, who kept friendships fed instead of postponed, who asked along the way not just how close am I, but who is this making me? Those questions don't fit into a compound interest chart. They may matter just as much as anything that does. The number, when it finally arrives, is real. It buys time, and time is not nothing. But it is worth saying clearly to anyone currently in the middle of the years of refusal, the destination will not automatically undo what the journey required of you. That part is a separate piece of work, quieter, slower, and unlike the savings rate, never really finished.